Welcome to Liberation Lab, where we talk all things liberation and education. I'm honored to start this whole platform off with my guest. We'll be back on the next side talking about freedom schools and the future of Black education. I am honored to have on, and I want to let you introduce yourself, good sir. Why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, why you do it, and who you do it for?
Man, that's a lot. My name is Christopher Stewart. I'm the CEO of Brightbeam. We're a national education nonprofit. We do advocacy around what we call child justice. We run a national child justice campaign. Who do I do it for? I do it for my ancestors, for my family, for my community, for myself, and for the me that was not well suited or well treated in traditional district public schools coming up. I do it for that me that could have done better had I been in better educational circumstances, and the me who became a parent at 22 years old and has now witnessed many, many years of parenting through multiple different kids and seeing that there's always going to be a need to fight for better education constantly.
That is amazing. So, I mean, there's at least as I'm seeing it, a whole arc, a trajectory of just how life is kind of you've gone down this path of fighting for better education. Um, but before there was Brightbeam, before there
hmm
was
hmm
all that we know, um, if you go back in time and talk to your younger self, what were some of the biggest lessons I guess you kind of learned along the way that paved the way for where we are now?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, the first thing is that I should have never equated schooling with education in the first place. 'Cause I carried a lot of educational shame about not doing well and not completing the work that I should have done while I was in school. And I watched people go off and do great things, and I didn't have the same trajectory that they did. But I was always the learner. I was always like learning things, and I was always smart about trying to figure out if I don't know something, how can I know it? To educate myself. That doubled down when I became a parent. So in my early 20s, if I hadn't become a parent, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you right now talking, just because I wouldn't have been interested in these things. I wouldn't have been rethinking my educational life. I wouldn't have had a purpose or a reason to start questioning schooling and what had happened with me. Listen, when I had a child, that became real quick, because I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, that's a question that you have to ask yourself. Like, like, I can't give my child everything in the world, but I can try and figure this education part out. Man, if I had to go back in time, I would give myself more confidence. I would
Mhm.
let myself know, these people that you think are experts don't know as much as they think that they know. They should not be trying to make you feel smaller than you actually are. This stuff isn't rocket science. You can figure this out. You can learn. Your kids can learn. I probably would have told myself too to not rely as much on outside of my household for things that you can do inside your household. Like, I'm stuck on this idea now that every home is a school,
Mm.
like whether you want it to be or not. There's an elder in my community who always used to yell at me, "Stop saying that our kids aren't learning. Our kids are. You can't stop kids from learning," is what she used to say. Kids are learning all the time. They may not be learning what you're trying to teach, and that might be because you're a bad teacher, but kids are always learning. So stop acting like our kids aren't learning. And that kind of changed my mind a little bit. Like, in your house, your kids are always learning the things that you
Yeah.
put in front of them. You know, so maybe you need a pedagogy.
Mm.
If you're going to be a school anyways, if your house is going to be a school whether you want it to be or not, and you're going to be a teacher whether you want to be or not at home, do you have a plan? That's what I would told my younger self. Do you have a system, a plan?
Mm.
Are you staying on top of, like, the things that your kid is supposed to be learning? um but I think the main thing is confidence. I would have told myself, man, be confident, you got
Be
this.
confident. Yeah, I think that that's so key because you know, anytime you step out and you do something that is paradigm shifting or pushes against status quo or challenges anything, you know, you're going to be made to feel like you're the one that's wrong, or
Mhm.
you,
Mhm.
you know, you're the problem that needs to be solved versus the problem you're trying to solve. Um, I think about that often, especially when we talk about education, right? Students who come into my classroom. So I teach now in Trenton, New Jersey, and um, I am seeing students who may not be able to articulate in the ways that some teachers are trying to receive it, but they're articulating the fact that they are not willing to shrink. They're not willing to be conformed
Mm.
into what schooling is making them try to do.
Mhm.
Um, in your advocacy, in your justice work that you are pursuing and doing and excelling at, what like just talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in education. I want to kind of zone in on the freedom schools idea, but just where we are right now and what you're seeing.
Mhm. I mean, right now, what I'm seeing is there's a lot of disarray because what had normally been our safeguard in education, like our default, like being able to take our kids somewhere every day, have it just work, like just drop them off and or have them take a bus or whatever, has had all kinds of problems. The schedules go up and down. Kids get quarantined; they have to stay home. We're falling behind in places. Um, Things just aren't as clear. So there's like I think a lot of like appetite for wanting to get back to the way that things used to be, even though things didn't used to be good. There's still like a lot of wanting to get back at least to when they were normal. They felt like, you could go to work and just come home and your kid was taken care of. From a data perspective, this is a catastrophe. Like we are losing so much ground in terms of what kids are learning and whether they're on track and what path they're going to be on. And we will not realize the full impact of that for a while, which is sad because as bad as we think it is right now, we're not paying attention to there's some prophecy happening. Like what comes next in the future? What happens? So today's 5-year old, what happens when they're 15, right? How will their life have been different than a 15-year-old today who was 5, 10 years ago? Those are two different kids right now. We're not paying attention to that. This comes home to roost at some point. All this pandemic stuff, this online learning that's not very good, this schools opening and closing and up and down, and parents having to like piece together an education. Or in some places, people have gone back to fairly normal schooling. It's fairly normal. They got masks on or something like that, and they're going every day. And we still are not aware at how much of a hot mess it is in some of those schools. Like, um, this will come home to roost on us. That's what I'm seeing right now is red flags, signs about the future where I'm like, this is not trending the right direction for us.
Absolutely. Um, as someone who's like, I see it. Like the students come every day,
Hmm.
right? They're in school. Um, but it seems like everyone is kind of on daily maintenance mode, just trying to survive the day. There's no, where are we going, vision casting, trajectory,
Hmm.
let's take the hill, none of that. It's really like, let's just survive.
Hmm.
And I think it's really exposed so much in terms of how the perceived and in some places real divide between school and community,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
schools have set themselves up in a lot of ways as, you think of the castle with the moat and the drawbridge, and you can only come in when I let down the drawbridge, and you better come in the way I'm asking you to. Um, and that divide we're seeing kind of play out. School teachers and students, their interactions are, Lord, there's stories I could tell. The students and themselves coming together, like their interpersonal relationships have been severely affected just by everything that's been going on. Um, it's very real. And just like you're saying, that I don't think that we'll see the full weight of it because I don't think anybody especially for black and brown kids, black kids in particular. They're not looking with foresight. They're just trying to get through, right?
I mean, we're not paying attention to the fact that there's a group of kids who've never had a normal school year now in their lifetime. So
Yeah, yeah,
their first grade and second grade are some dystopian dark version of school that nobody else before had.
yeah.
Well, that's a new generation of kids. They're going to be a next generation. We haven't figured out. We're going to try and figure out later what we should do to help remediate or educate them. But they're going to be kind of a lost generation. We don't do it soon. We don't start thinking about it soon. Kids' mental health, their parents' mental health, their sense of no, I'm okay, but they're really not, right? The sense that people are walking around, we're like, still interacting in ways like the world's normal, and in the back of our minds, we know that we're going through something. We're going through some things. That kind of dual consciousness of walking around pretending like things are okay when they're really not is is not healthy, and it's not a long-term strategy for our success. When it comes to our kids as adults, we're having to suck it up. Just like do what we got to do. Go to work, do what you got to do, keep the food on, lights on, food on the table. But for our kids, we have to do as much maximal work as we possibly can about sheltering them from
Mhm,
depressive factors, things that are depressing, things that are
mhm,
depressing them. We got to pay attention to if they spend a little bit more time in their room than they normally would, or a little bit more time on their screen, or normal things that would have used to make them happy don't anymore. Or, we're missing a lot of social milestones, social markers.
yeah,
Um, Not everywhere. I want to talk about this like it's, the same everywhere, but we have a lot of work to do as parents if we're going to shield and shelter our kids so that they can develop the best they can possibly do right now.
absolutely. I mean, I see it with my son. He's in fourth grade now,
Mm,
so he basically just went back to school this year, right? So we're talking the last 2 years affected, and now he's back to some semblance of school, and and on top of that, between his third grade year and his fourth grade year, we moved.
hmm,
So what was normal to him and relationships that he was longing to go back to see, he didn't have that. And so now he takes a virtual school with a teacher in a new place with people he does not know, and then he goes back to the school at the start of the following year, and the adjustment has been really, really hard for him in a lot of ways. Now kids are resilient and resourceful, and we don't give them enough credit for how they handle and go through things. He's adjusted pretty well, and he obviously he has a support system. But I think about like the privilege that I've been afforded to be able to navigate that and to know the
mm,
markers and to know how to ask certain questions because of just study and what I do as an educator and things like that. But like there are many families who don't have that privilege, don't know how to access that part of their kids. And it it takes a real toll on the family,
mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
Um and so it makes me think like well, it's just like we've been saying, like something's gotta change. And I just don't I if I'm being real in this moment, I don't know that it like I'm not really high on hope that it will change. I
Mhm,
think, you know, I try to advocate for a change in terms of places in our little locus of control, right? Like in our classrooms, what can we do? And our group of teachers, what can we do? But from a system standpoint, like I'm not there yet. And even when you get there, there's a larger system like at work. And it just seems like we're running out of options in what's already a failed and broken system that will not change.
mhm, mhm.
Um
I
yeah,
think like if we really do believe in education, though, as we say we do, as
yeah.
important as it is, there are no easy answers to get out of what we're doing right now. There's no easy answers for parents. There's no book that has been written that has all the like, well, I mean, now if you're Christian, some might say there is a book that could be a little helpful to you through tough times. But in general speaking, we are going through some unprecedented
Yeah.
strains and stressors to the way that we do family and we raise kids and all that. So let's just start there.
Yeah.
It would be possible for you to be the type of person who freaks out of everything. Oh my God, the world's so awful, everything's terrible, blah, 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 whatever.
Mhm.
It would also be possible for you to say, what's the most educated I could possibly be in this moment to meet the moment,
Mm,
right? To be the most kind of, we say that kids are resilient. I think we overuse that right now because they are resilient in normal times. I don't know that they were built for this particular time without
absolutely.
getting
Yes.
depressed.
Yeah.
Adults need to be resilient, though, right now, in terms of we've been through tough times before. Our parents went through tough times. Our grandparents went through tough times. There was this thing called the Depression. There have been multiple
Right.
recessions. The
Right.
world has had problems before, but the way that you handle those problems or whatnot is important. So if you made it through the Depression, you have one set of skills that nobody else had before or after the Depression. This is our Depression. This is our thing, right? And when I think about how people handle crisis, because that's what this is, you have to be educated to handle crisis. So we should be thinking through, what do our kids need in terms of mental health? How much do I know about that already? Should I be educating myself more on that right now? Yes, I should. What are the signs that my kid might need some help? If I don't know, I should educate myself on that right now. I should like quickly upload the information I need to be the universal parent I need to be at this moment, like the universal soldier, because this is tough times, right? I think the information is there, it's out there. We shouldn't be trying to do it alone. Black people and people of color or whatnot, our interests are tied to each other. So we need to be actually information sharing, support sharing, finding ways for uncles to become super uncles and aunts to become super aunts, for cousins to be like pitching in. And when it comes to education, we have to actually look outside the schools,
Yeah.
right? Other people are right now. The number of people that are getting tutoring right now, the number of people for all families, especially those with resources, has shot up.
Mhm. Mhm.
So even the people who are fighting to get their kids into their pretty little um, um, schools that they moved out to the suburbs to get or whatnot are providing extra help for their students, for their young people as they need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do we. We need to actually be doing that too, because the schools aren't, you just said it a minute ago, the schools aren't going to catch up
No.
anytime soon. Even if they wanted to, it's not that they have to all be evil or bad people or any of that. It's a big system with lots of, they were not made for this. They were not ready for this. The idea that you would have people go out, whole grades of kids go out for a year to 2 years to 3 years of, learning at home was
Mhm.
not something that the system was built for at all. So even if they're all amazing, great people, this is not what they do. Like
Yeah.
they weren't ready for this. So we need a different plan.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's very interesting to think about how much we know already that we don't do, right? Like
Hmm.
there
Mm.
is
Mhm.
this idea of we need like this new framework, this new,
Mhm.
pedagogy that's going to make the difference. But there's stuff that we already know works that we
Mhm.
are choosing not to do. When we last talked, we talked even just about the simple fact of food, sustenance.
Mhm. Mhm.
When kids go into school, the junk that they are served every single day.
It's not even real food, man. It's just not.
I
Uh,
I look at it and I'm like we we're talking about higher rates of diabetes and so many other things that are affecting our people. And yet when you go to the very thing that you're telling me I have to surrender my kid to this thing, I have to give it to my kid over. I have to sacrifice this kid for you because you're asking me to,
mhm.
right? Legally.
Mhm.
And then when I do, you're feeding them a bunch of garbage and you're choosing not to educate them in ways that empower them. Why?
Mhm.
Like why? Why? It
Mhm.
is it is it is hard to fathom. And so that brings me to, just kind of the history of, you mentioned it last time we talked, of freedom schools and what, and basically this future of black, education, black and brown folks trying to navigate schooling and education in ways that are going to be sustainable and helpful to them. What does that look like? Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um So if you could, like, for those who may not know anything about, well, could you just kind of explain, you know, what the idea of freedom schools is, how that applies to today, and just your thoughts around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think freedom schools, not being like an historian on these or an expert on it, but
Right.
freedom schools were a self-determination strategy for people of color to take the education of their young people, the intellectual development of the young people into their own hands, realizing that um, realizing that we had all these kind of signs from the past that told us that no oppressor is going to train you with the tools that you need to overthrow them, right? Like that's written in several of our ancestral writings. Like that's a theory that's been around for us for a long time. And we don't talk enough about the fact that Black folks in America have chosen multiple kind of alternative educational paths for as long as we have been here. When it was illegal to teach us to read, we found ways to read. We found subversive ways to educate ourselves and to be
Yeah.
educated. That has happened. That never stopped happening. That happened in church basements, that happened in back rooms, that happened under trees and in fields and in forests. It happened in schools that we built with our own hands and educated kids with our own teachers and through our own development of pedagogy and curriculum. Um, Throughout time, we kind of morphed all of that into the universal public system and gave our kids over to that. And then after 1954 and years after, we kind of even broke that down further and shut down the Black schools, the Black teaching, the Black leadership in education, what I call Black educational capital. Those weren't just jobs that we lost after 1954 when we shut down all those schools and sent our kids to white led, white run schools or schools in systems that were the government system. We lost more than jobs and buildings. We lost knowledge, institutional knowledge. Gaps were closing. People don't talk about this. Anybody listens to Vanessa Siddle Walker's work around what Black educators were doing prior to Brown versus Board, there's a there's a lot of kind of scholarship around they were making that tells you that they were making gains, they were closing gaps, they were reinterpreting the white world's standards specifically for Black children and actually getting them across the goalpost. And they were doing something that we don't do enough of. Schools should prepare you to be free. Schools should prepare
Mm,
you to engage in your democracy in ways that make you free. So, what Black educators and Black schools were doing prior to Brown, before we had the big government takeover of our young people, they were teaching them not just educational things, but life things about how to engage in democracy,
yeah.
how to build power in communities. So, the freedom school concept too comes after that, in that we turn our kids over and start losing a lot of that power. We start losing a lot of that pedagogical kind of prowess that we had before in educating our own students. And in the same way that you take yourself out of a bad situation and put yourself in a good situation, freedom schools is the idea that we stop dipping our kids like tea bags in these oppression pools that we call public schools, and we start dipping them in clean water in places where we can start fresh with a culturally affirming pedagogy, a culturally affirming environment that reorients and re-educates them in the way that God would have them be educated were we not living in a racist white supremacist society, right?
Mm,
Whatever your
mm,
God is, or however you want to think about your God, you have to wake up every day knowing we weren't meant to be treated the way that we're being treated or educated the way we're being educated in this environment. Freedom schools believe you could set up new systems of schools. We don't pay attention to the fact in the 1970s, going into the 1980s, there was a much larger system of independent Black schools. And by
yeah.
independent, I mean completely independent. There was a nationwide kind of network of them. And we lost those. So today's the freedom school today is a recovery system. It's a
Mm,
reclamation system. Reclaim the Black mind.
yeah.
Reclaim, like you're going to have babies. You're going to have Black babies in this country. They are born with these things called brains, and those brains are going to develop. And who do you want to hand over the development of that Black brain to? And if your answer is the traditional system that has told you in every way possible for your entire time of being in this country that they have no interest in developing that Black brain in a way that makes that Black person free, then you need freedom schools, right? Like you need to take that intellectual development of your child and put it into the hands and the care of people that do care about you being free at some point.
And so there's like so much in there that I think is so key. When you juxtapose that, can you still hear me?
Yep, I gotcha.
Okay. When you juxtapose that with the picture that we're painted right now, right? Um 70, I think it was like 75%, almost upwards of 80 if you count, I think, white men of educators are white, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
In a society that how do you teach the analogy, how do you teach the fish that it's wet, right? Like they don't, some of them some of them don't care to know, some of them are ignorant, some of them are straight out racist, and some of them are complicit. Like it kind of, they're all over the place, right? And so they come in, and then there's others who are on more on the, what we would say, liberal side, who come in and they're like, we're going to save these Black babies. We're gonna come in and we're going to help them be more white, even though they won't say that.
Mhm, mhm,
How, when you look at that juxtaposition, like, one, what are some of the thoughts that come to mind, like in terms of just how that's working out, and then two, for those who would know and see that something has to change,
mhm, mhm,
how do they
mhm,
how do you navigate something like that? Right? Like if you're a family
mhm.
that's like, nah, I mean, I'm in the middle of this thing and I'm giving my kid over to the state and I know it's not working, but I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, so on the first part of that, the well, first of all, awareness. You have to be aware, first of all, that there's a problem. If you don't know that there's a problem, you won't do anything. When you do discover that you're putting your kids in the wrong hands, you have to start doing. I mean, listen, when I was 22 years old as a father, I didn't know what I knew at 25, and I didn't know what I knew at 27 and 28. But what I learned along the way is the information towards your freedom, like for schools, like to be able to have options and choices or whatnot, is not made readily available to you. It's not like somebody on day one sits with you and says, "Now here are all the educational pathways your kid could take and the options. Here are the different schools. Here are the different applications, the deadlines, whatever." That I had to figure that out all out on my own through some like pretty serious investigative skills, right? Um, and if it wasn't for the commitment that I was going to do that, I probably wouldn't have found half of the opportunities that we found. But we're resourceful people. Like when it comes to programs and after school programs and whatever, we find them. Like, if we know to look, if we know that there's a
Right.
need. Yeah. So I think part of it is generating more will for people to like look for the options in schooling, because when it comes to after school programs or whatnot, I feel like we do more research on those, or like extracurriculars, because we have to look around for those. There's no default. There's nobody who just says, oh no, on Tuesday you just go, right? We have to take that attitude into schooling also,
Mm,
because right now there's a default of, what, tell me your address, where do you live? Okay, here's the school that you go to, right?
yeah.
So I think we have to do more around, one, for ourselves first. Charity starts at home. Make individual commitments to ourselves that I'm going to be the kind of like most militant parent I can be about the education of my child. I'm going to like be super militant, so militant that I'm going to be ruthless about the development of this Black brain, right?
Yeah.
And once you say that, then you start making your own choices. And what happened with me over time as an activist in education is, every time I found out something or felt like I had cracked the code on something, I would start sharing that information with other people. Like I found a school once that was like just amazing, for one of my kids, and it just was such a step up from everything that we were being offered, that I felt like I had to go back and tell other people about that school. Like I had to go share.
Mm,
I was like, this isn't just about me anymore. That whole individualistic thing, like, crabs in a bucket, you got to get out or you got to leave or whatever, without thinking about the rest of the community or whatnot. That's not what I had. I was on some other stuff. I was like, man, if I could figure this out, we all can figure this out, right?
Yes.
So sharing that information, and you know what, to be real, that's how I found a lot of, as a young dad without a lot of money. The way
Hmm.
that I found every program was through word of mouth, like people sharing information with each other. We just had a good exchange with each other. It was always a little bit harder with schools, but I swear that's how I became an activist, was just feeling that I needed to share the information. Every time I had a problem that was hard to solve and I figured out a solution to it, I went back and shared it with other people that I thought had the same problem.
So what then? So I hear that. I agree. I look at the ways in which, for example, when something happens in our um in schools, the most attended school board meeting is the meeting
Mhm,
after something has happened.
mhm, mhm,
But
mhm,
when the budget gets passed
mhm,
and when monies are being allocated and people are going into their executive sessions and approving these things that they have already said in public because people have not been there
mhm,
and people aren't necessarily, you know, like either it's one, they don't know, two, they have to, they're working multiple, trying to get multiple streams of income, right? There's so many reasons why we're not there. And some of it
mhm,
is apathy, if we're being
mhm,
honest,
mhm, mhm,
right? When I think about our position when it comes to education, when it comes to even just like local elections and different things like that, we are very much so, my this is me, I speak, my
mhm,
opinion here.
mhm,
But we're very much so reactionary. So when something happens and there's a scandal, oh, then we go and then we want to attend and then we want to make our voice heard. But it's almost like in the moments where we should be the loudest, we're not there or we're not
mhm.
as present. How do we shake ourselves from this apathy, from this, you know, like I said, this reactionary type of move we have?
I mean, it's a big question, but I will say up front, we have to validate the apathy, right? There's a reason people aren't born apathetic.
Yeah.
They learn to be apathetic because the best available information tells them that almost nothing makes a difference, right?
Mm,
That's the reality of being black in this country
yeah, yeah, that's a word.
and still being alive, right? Is that black people have tried a lot of different things. We've tried voting, we've tried meetings, we've tried conferences, we've tried schooling and education, we've tried marching, we've tried setting things on fire, right? We've tried a lot of things and we end up roughly in the same position, which is subservient to the dominant culture through
Yeah,
all these different tries. And then we have people show up like, y'all should be caring about such and such. Y'all need to, do this and do that and whatever. Sounds good. But we
yeah,
have like a 200-300 year history of trying things. And some of them broke free. I mean, slavery was broken down as a national way of you know organizing society, and then Jim Crow was basically beaten, but a new version of it came afterwards.
yeah,
Civil rights legislation passed and gave us all kinds of rights we didn't have, and then legislation came after that to take away many of those rights or mitigate them.
yeah,
We still live in a world of gentrification, redlining, voter suppression, shutting down voting booths in Black communities while opening them up in white communities, and
yep.
nobody paying attention or caring. And meanwhile, we have people that keep coming to us telling us, you need to vote. Well,
That is
Black
true.
people are some of the most votingest people in the world, and they stand in line for 4 hours. I live in a white area of the country. It takes us 8 minutes to vote. I look on TV and see my family down south standing in lines for 4 or 5 hours to vote. That
Yeah,
would never fly where I live, right?
absolutely.
That
Yeah,
would never fly. So, so part of it is just, let me just say, I said all that just to say validate the apathy. They're not apathetic because they're not willing to try. They're apathetic because they're intelligent. So I just want to start with that, right?
That's
Just
good.
like some of the most defiant Black boys in school are defiant because they're intelligent. Like a sign of good
Yeah.
health is assessing the fact that something is completely wrong and obsessive and
Yep.
not complying with it.
Yep.
Right. Right. So the most probably well-adjusted, healthy person is either cynical or apathetic or defiant to the system and the things you're coming to tell them. So that's one.
Hmm.
The second thing is organizing is important. Like, we can't know everything about every issue. It requires some people to have already done the deep homework on things and start organizing people. You know, we're not scientists, so to figure out that there was lead in our water for like years, for decades, and that lead was causing special education cases to rise in many communities,
Yep.
and that was one of our problems. It took environmental racism study people and organizers to bring that to the community and say, no, we got to organize this around. When y'all see that brown water or you see water that doesn't smell or taste right or whatnot, that is dangerous and that's deadly, and let's organize around it. Before then, we weren't showing up to the water board meetings. There were whole
Yeah.
meetings that were taking place that were making decisions that were, that we were on the wrong end of. We weren't going to those meetings because no one was organizing us with information and with a rallying cry. Same thing with schools. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't even have kids in the schools, right? Not
Yeah.
everybody's a parent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you ask them about the local public schools, they don't know very much about it, right? We have a lot more Black single people than we've ever had, you know, single
So
people, single
true.
dwellings. And you go and ask them about the schools in their community, they're going to know absolutely zero about. They bought them a little condo or they got them a little apartment or they got some little jumping off point. And if you ask them about the school that's 3 blocks from their house, they're going to know absolutely zero about it.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. That's
Organizing and information. We have to organize people. Once we know, for instance, like I'm walking around with all this stuff I learned over all these years or whatnot, then it's on me to organize and to talk to people about these things because I didn't know it before somebody else brought it to me.
yeah.
And there's all this other stuff that's going on. Like, ask me 5 questions about how police unions contracts work, and I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't even know how that stuff gets decided or where it's at. So it's all my criminal justice homies that are able to tell me, no, you need to pay attention to that
Yeah.
local police contract, for instance. How would we know that, you know?
Right. No, I think that's such a great reminder. And the the history, the documented record of resistance, of continuing to push through oppressive systems, of voting, of
Mm,
activism, of of so many different things is such a great reminder because if we're not careful, we'll believe the lie that we're not that same people today, right?
mm,
Like,
mhm,
like
mhm.
we don't come from that type of legacy. That's not who we are. That what we are lazy. What we are is that we don't care. In our frustrations, I've used this analogy before, but it's almost like, you're teaching in a school. Two students are sitting next to each other. Maybe they're laughing or joking, and another student comes by unseen and flicks one in the ear.
Mhm,
Those students begin to bicker with one another. Meanwhile, the other students in the corner are laughing at both of them.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
feel like when we talk about black and brown folks, black people in particular, that's what white supremacy has done to us. That
mhm.
sometimes we're looking at one another and we're just going in and talking about one another and we're mad about, but meanwhile, our fighting has been caused by something else, something other than us.
I mean, think about the white supremacist training that we've had, right?
Yeah.
So going back some decades, like, I've talked about these things a lot because they fascinate me. Just public policy around you can't have a man in the house if you want to stay in public housing,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
if you want assistance, right? To get the assistance requires you to kick the man out,
Out of the
and
house.
for you to be, and then years later you blame families for not being together. You blame
Absolutely.
like, oh my God, you guys had a collapse in marriages. Really? We did? We did? You think so? And then you went through this time period where, you had the drug that I use is the same drug that you use. The only difference is I put baking soda in mine and you don't put any baking soda in yours. And because of that, mine is like 100 times more punishable by long prison sentences, while
Yep.
you have the pure drug, right? we,
Right.
we made baking soda punishable by like 100 times more, and it sounds silly like when I say it that way, but man, like we put a whole generation of black males out of public housing,
Yep.
out of jobs.
Yep.
We had the industrial bottom of cities fall out, and then
Yep.
when this other economy started, we punished them by long sequestering, get them out of the communities, put them in jail, and over time. And now we pretend like we don't know how we've been trained to be who we are. We walk
Mm,
around, we listen to music that debases our women, debases ourselves, and we're not the ones reaping the profit off of that music, right?
mm,
That soundtrack of stupidity that's playing in our ears 24/7.
mm,
If you follow the money of who's really living on yachts based upon us telling ourselves that stupid nonsense on replay about how our women ain't worth nothing and how we ain't worth nothing and how we're just a bunch of whatnot, that's training. We're being trained. We're being programmed. We're like in the program. The program is got us 24/7 consuming our own death and oppression over and over again. When we talk about our young people and our kids, the best you could possibly do is, like I said earlier, get them out of that tea bag, stop dousing them in this consumerist, racist, military kind of worldview, and put them in a worldview that cleans them up a little bit and gets their mind straight. It's
mm,
hard to do. You got Netflix. I have Netflix.
mhm.
Scroll through that thing looking for something that's good for a 5 to 6 to 8-year-old black kid to watch. You might find more things now than I've ever seen in my lifetime, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
There's more now than there's ever been, and there still isn't a lot.
Nah. Nah.
There still isn't a lot.
Yeah.
Even at this point, I feel like, listen, I'm old enough to be like amazed by how much it has changed. When I was a kid, you could go through entire months without seeing a person of color in anything,
Yeah.
like superhero movies or any of that type of stuff. But now the media culture, the educational culture, the um, the public culture, like how our kids exist in public and how they're treated, all of that kind of sends them the message every day that they are lesser than.
Mm,
They're getting a loop in their head of lesser than. The way they're treated in shopping malls, the way their interactions with police, totally different than or authority figures. Period.
yeah.
Right? We're training them to not be free, and we can't participate in it. Now,
Right.
listen, my A Black Hands homies, they get after me on like when we start talking about the hip hop and the music and all that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
You
because I've
know,
I've I've listened. I've heard y'all go at it a
oof.
little bit on those, and there are many who will say like, "Yo, bro, like there's a whole movement, hip hop ed and folks who are proponents of the art form, and we can talk about the other stuff that may exist within the art form, but this art form and what we can do with it, and so I hear that, and then my mind immediately went to Mayor Adams from New York and
Mhm.
his um the legislation he's trying to put forth about the music, and I'm like,
Oh, what legislation is this? I haven't heard this.
he's trying to. I'm gonna look it up because I don't
Yeah.
want to misquote, but like he's put out there that because of the art form of hip hop and drugs and things that are in the music, that it is almost indoctrinating, just like you're saying,
Mhm.
our young people.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there are other folks who will say, but there's no one-to-one correlation for that stuff. Like we're saying it, but like drugs was, it was in rock music and all these other art forms, and there's not like a one-to-one correlation for that being true.
There is,
And
though. I think there is a one-to-one
please,
correlation. Here's what I'll say. First of all, I've said this before in A Black Hands. When you put on like romantic music, like back in the day when people used to put on Teddy Pendergrass or the OJs or something like that, it
yeah,
made them feel good.
yeah,
Why did it make you feel good? If music is so inconsequential, Why does it, like, I'm gonna show my age, but people uh put on Frankie Beverly and Maze when they
Hmm.
want to have Sunday brunch, like a good weekend vibe, a black
Yeah.
weekend vibe. It's
Yeah.
like that universal old school, like I'm sorry, Mercury, Freddie, Beverly and Maze are like black famous, right?
Yeah.
And you could ask 80 white people who they are, and they would never be able to tell you the
Very true.
majority,
Very true.
right? We love that music so much because it makes it feel good. So if music has the power to make us feel festive or celebratory on a weekend, like all is good or whatnot, it also has the power then to do some other things to us and to control our thinking. If we
Yeah.
are listening 24/7 to Women Ain't Nothing in our ear, and then we're encountering women, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't tell me that that's different. That wouldn't be different if we were listening to Frankie Beverly and Maze all day long, right? Now that's an old guy talking. But I think the money is the bigger problem. The people who are
Hmm.
making the decision of corporate hip hop, the people who are making the decisions of what's going to get played and what isn't, what artists are going to get signed or not,
Yeah.
has started years ago with a bias towards violence and a bias towards prison culture,
Mm.
right? They created the prison soundtrack that is actually glorifying much of what is prison culture, right?
Yeah.
They made a choice to do that for profits,
Yeah.
right? Now their kids get to listen to it as like this, kind of ironic, aren't ironic. I live out in the majority of hip hop buyers aren't even black anymore. They haven't been for years. Let's just be real.
Very true.
So we're selling a fake version of our story to a different population, not just nationally, but globally,
Hmm.
right? It ain't even a story we're living, but they didn't turned us into Scarface, like our story in Scarface. That was a corporate boardroom decision, right? To not sign more Public Enemies and Tribe Called Quest and Jungle Brothers and good hip hop that made you feel good about being black and being in America and having power and all that. That stuff went away, right?
Mm.
Got replaced. Somebody made that decision. I only beat up on this, like, listen, every old generation is going to like say the next generation is going crazy or whatever, whatever. That's just a cliche at this point.
Yep.
But these are educational tools,
Mm.
right? So when I say your home is a school and you're a teacher, no matter whether you want to be or not, and you must have a pedagogy, your pedagogy should include a curriculum. And what's the curriculum that you want to put? Do you want to put death and destruction and the N word and everything? Is that your curriculum? Because if that's your
Mm.
curriculum, cool, have at it. But prisons are full of people with that curriculum.
With that
Who
curriculum.
got
Yeah.
that curriculum? Do you want to fill it with something that makes your children feel powerful? Make them feel like there's nobody that can beat them, make them feel like they're going to win at the game of life or whatnot. Now that's a different pedagogy.
Yeah.
And our kids are not actually accessing, I think there's all this potential around them. But I think we are participating in fast tracking them to be somebody else's kind of support or whatever, but not be the leaders, not be the rulers of the world, not be the one in the room who feel like, no, I got the answers, right? No, 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 this is my room. Whatever that movie was, I'm the captain now.
Yeah.
We need more kids with that mentality. No, I'm the captain now.
Yeah. As we I I love that. I think that that's it's so interesting because you know the stuff that you described and the music that you talked to. Like, so for me, I was raised primarily by my grandparents,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and so for me, that's what I grew up with. Like,
Hmm.
I still listen
Hmm.
to I was listening to him yesterday.
Hmm. Hmm.
The hip hop I was attracted to wasn't what's popularized. You know what I mean? Like, I still have a place in my heart for like Kendrick and J. Cole
Hmm.
and folks like
Hmm.
that. But like, it's so interesting to kind of hear that and then see it, right? Because the people that my students idolize are the very people who are talking about the death of my young people. So yeah. Yeah, I think
And they're
that's so
telling them, like, I mean, they're instilling moral values of, I don't care about nobody. I'm just drunk and high all the time. Money is all that matters.
yeah.
Materialism, capitalism. I don't care about you. You got to get yours. I'll
Yeah.
take you out if I have to or whatnot. These are the values that are being imparted into them. These are not African values. Let's just be real, right?
Not at
Like
all.
these are not African. These aren't even African American values.
Right.
We all do better when we all do better. We can, we can live together as brothers or we can perish as fools, right? Like, these are the things that make us who we are. But that's not
Yeah.
the hip hop message. The hip hop message is I'll take you out. I don't care about nothing. I'm crazier than crazy. I'm this, that, and the other. Um, and we have to figure this out because it is entertaining to some of our people. I watched this happen. Like, listen, I went through the whole NWA phase from day one, right? Like when it
Mm,
first came out, because before that, that part of the street wasn't heard very much. There was a lot more party hip hop, dancing hip hop, you
yeah.
know. And NWA was a fresh voice. It was like, nah, these are real dudes, like from the real streets, in some ways, except for my favorite out of that group, Ice Cube, came from a two-parent household in the suburbs, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Dr. Dre, same thing. He didn't necessarily have the whole kind of like, he had a suburban existence too or whatnot. So I watched Ice Cube go from his first album was brilliant to like about his third or fourth, where he's talking about like beheading people and stuff. And I'm like, bro, this has never been you.
Yeah.
Like you just performing.
Yeah.
Now you just
Yeah. It's
this
an
is just
act.
performative. Yeah, now this is just an act. You ain't never beheaded nobody.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to take the conversation there, except to say we have the power to educate our children how we want to educate them. And what we put, first of all, your house is a school, you are
Yeah.
a teacher, you
Yeah.
must have a pedagogy. Your pedagogy should have like a canon and a curriculum. What are you going to put in their arsenal? Everybody has to read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. That
Oh,
just
one of my
makes a lot of
favorites.
sense, right? Yeah, that just has to happen. It's thin, it's skinny, it's not a lot of work to get through it, but it's beautiful and eloquent and teach you so much. You don't get to, uh, you know, mumble rap before you get to James Baldwin. I'm sorry, that's just in this house. That's the way the pedagogy is going to work, right?
That's good. Yeah.
Um, and what are the other ones? You're an educated person. We have connections with each other. I've asked this question to others. What would you put in your canon, right? Like what's in your library? And it's interesting. A lot of the same books come up when I ask people that question.
Yeah.
Like a lot of
Yeah. I
the
mean,
same ones come up.
Miseducation of the Negro, right?
Gotta be
Yeah.
there.
That's gotta be in there.
Absolutely.
Um, I I would definitely add the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander.
Gotta be in there. Before the
Uh,
Mayflower. That's gotta be in there.
yeah. For me, also one of the most life changing books I've read, and how I view just my position as an educator, is Push Out by Dr. Monique Morris.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, it's she outlines in there just the adultification of our young black girls and how,
I was gonna say that was the girl that was on Girls, right? That
yes,
book. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
transformative for
Yeah.
me, because like she uses this analogy of how, rightfully so, we mourn Tamir Rice, and
Hmm.
we mourn how in that 11 seconds he was taken out, but his sister was at that part too.
Mhm,
His
mhm,
sister was there, and we don't even know that part of the story. Like, we just,
mhm,
like, black women are erased almost from this type of indoctrination and pushing into, and the incarceration rates for them have been on a climb, and we haven't necessarily talked about. So it's, for me, it was that transformative. So like, even in my space on like Instagram and other spaces, like, I center the voices of black women, particularly because of that book, because of what it did
mhm,
for me.
mhm.
Um, and so I would definitely add that one as well. Absolutely.
We should
Absolutely.
keep talking about this, man. We should keep sharing this catalog,
Yeah. I think that we just had to
right?
have one, like, just to keep a database that we would all go to, and like, no, we have to just get this. You know what I mean? Like, that would just be phenomenal.
I would
And
love
what,
that. And if anybody's listening who's into business and needs business ideas, the ability for there to be that catalog or that canon, and for me to be able to go in and just buy it for $150 and send it to somebody who's having a baby or a kid so they have it in their house could be a way for me to, like, listen, we all can help,
that's
right?
good.
We can
Yeah.
help others, right? So, oh, you having a baby? Listen, I got about 15 books that you should just have on your shelf in your house and just keep them
Yes.
there, you know.
Yes. That's really good. As we round out our time, I want to ask you a final question, and then I want to, anything that you would love to share. I want to give you space for that. Um, when we think about moving forward, right? Tomorrow's going to come. Kids are going to go to, using your analogy, they're going to be dipped
Hmm.
into the
Hmm.
oppressive systems that are going
Hmm.
to tell them they're less than, and then punish them for being a product of what they've produced, which is just phenomenal. Because I can't think of a better word than that. That is happening. If you had a freedom dream, right? Up to you. Three things change. Snap of your finger. What would be like the
Mm.
top three things that you would want to see changed to help with what we're going to see tomorrow?
Phew, such a big question. I mean, this is, I'm probably going to keep thinking about this question after we wrap today, because I think
Yeah.
that is a huge question. The first one is, I don't think that policies that benefit healthy childhoods are prioritized by decision makers. And one thing that I would change quickly is that every decision maker, lawmaker, person in a position of power would feel the heat to always prioritize policies that foster healthy childhoods. Right? If you are a mayor of a city, you should be on the hook for the outcome of the children in your city. I don't care whether you control schools or not; they're in your city. Those children are in your jurisdiction. You should be on the hook for making sure that there is lots of rich opportunities for them to experience out of school time, learning in their city. Your city should be a school of itself, right? Why should museums cost anything? Why should zoos cost anything to young people? A young person should have a passport to a world of opportunity in every city that they live in, right? So that would be one thing, which is, yes, schools handle learning in some efficient capacity, but kids exist outside of school for the majority of their lifetime. So, rich environments for learning that are outside of schools would be one thing that I would change that we have right now. The other thing would be the parent kind of commitment to defending the brain, the mind, the intellectual development of their children, them seeing it specifically as a task, that as a thing. Your your intellectual development is my job.
Mm,
And whatever teachers I get to help with that, I choose them. I choose what goes into this brain. I choose who teaches them, where, how they do it, what the methods are, with what materials, whatnot. I would change the level of ownership that parents have over that part of the process,
mm,
so that you would know that parenting comes with that as an obligation, not so that it was a type of thing where you think it's somebody else's job or in someone else's hands.
yeah.
Um, and I think I would change collectivism a little bit, like how much we see it not just as our job for our own, but a job for us all. Meaning, yes, I'm taking care of my children at home. I still have three in the pipeline. I'm still working on that. But the reason that you and I are talking right now is because I made a determination at some point that I have more to give. Like I have
Mm,
more. The focus isn't just if my three succeeded in life, we still would not have won,
mm,
right? Collectively, we still would not be free. Even
yeah.
if my three do amazing, we
Yeah.
still will not be free because of that. So the collective kind of the communal collective focus on lifting all our boats, meaning all our kids, would change. Some of us get nice jobs, get out of the city, get into places where we feel like we're in safe harbor and things are good. And then our commitment to the young people who have not been so fortunate to so-called get out,
Yep.
our commitment to them is weak. It wanes, right? We start
Yeah.
acting like the dominant population in our relationship to them.
Yeah.
So I would change that too. This is a big question, though, man. I am going to keep thinking about that because I feel like these answers are insufficient. But if you put me on the spot, I would change one, the prioritization of policies that foster good childhoods.
Yeah.
Two, um, and part of that I think is like out of school time, making sure that cities are rich environments or whatnot. Um, the parental kind of ownership of the intellectual development process of their kids, and the collectivism that we need to have to make sure all kids are good, not just our own.
Yeah. Yeah. I am huge on community, right? Like, and not community like proximity, but community where like we're really involved in the well-being and flourishing of one another, right? And I think what you're saying is so key because, our society thrives on this rugged individualism that says as long as I got mine, I'm good, right?
Right. Right.
And it leaves so many others exposed. And when we leave others exposed, then the system continues. And
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for that push. Um, I want to honor your time. Is there anything going on for you people should know about? Anything that people should tap into, and any parting words that you might have?
Listen, in terms of getting in touch with me, if anybody ever wants to know what's going on with me or be in touch, you can always find me at citizenstewart.com, which is my website. I also lead an organization called Brightbeam, and you can find us at brightbeamnetwork.org. That's really the best ways to find. I write on a regular basis. I speak on a regular basis, and I am constantly thinking about these issues deeply. So I'm always kind of thinking about ways in which we can share information with each other. So that's ways for people to find me. The parting words that I would have would just be, we've got a big job to do. We're built for it. We have all the information that we need. We just need to make the commitment that we're going to play an active part in the salvation of our children. We have to actually educate ourselves on what they need and when they need it. And we also have to try to not always do these things alone. We have to be working with each other, sharing information about opportunities and about programs and about breakthroughs or books or whatever. We just need to be in touch with each other because collectively we're responsible for all 8 million Black children. There's 8 million Black children in the United States. God help us if we can't get that small a number of kids to their highest potential. We can do it. It's only 8 million kids. There's over, 35 million of us in total. We can make this happen, but we can't do it alone. We have to actually all work together. That's my parting words.
So key and definitely needed. To your point, I think that there are many who get into this liberatory work, but as long as they can profit off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for folks like yourself who are pushing us to put the sacrifice in that's necessary so that we can see our babies thrive,
Mm-hmm.
And so I honor you, King. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for sharing space with us, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I'll make sure to put everything in the caption and people can connect. So thank you again.
Appreciate you. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.